This is the Living in Clarity podcast, and today we've got a very important episode.
Yes, very important. Welcome back, David.
Thank you for having me.
Back.
You had a very popular episode in your last Bitcoin. You know, you're pretty smart.
Thank you.
People commented how you really know a lot of stuff.
Really. No, that's good.
But unfortunately, today we're coming back because we have to talk about Sam Bankman-Fried.
Right. Before we get into that, we want to just start by talking about, first of all, we've been getting a lot of anti-Semitic comments.
Tons of anti-Semitic comments, which we're going to talk about in another episode.
Right.
But you know, it's very hard when you wake up in the morning, you read the newspaper, and you see another episode of, you know, Harvey Weinstein and or Bernie Madoff, and now it's Sam Bankman-Fried, another Jew who really has not done what Jews are supposed to be doing. He's completely taken billions of dollars, and I guess we're going to hear more about this, but
yes.
It's embarrassing for us. It's like, this is not what Jews are supposed to be doing, right?
Right. It almost can seem like it validates the anti-Semites, like what we're hearing from Kanye West and other celebrities right now, where there's anti-Semitism going rampant,
right,
and no one's really shaming them, even though you hear it a little bit. It's really clearly an underlying culture,
right,
and it's scary.
Yeah, unfortunately, it takes one bad person to make everyone look bad, because people put you into a certain segment. You know, like when, you know, if someone from some, you know, if an Indian person does something bad, then it makes all Indians look bad, right? And so we don't like it as Jews. It's like, this is not the way. Unfortunately, it's the bad people that get the news, right? You're never standing in line at the checkout counter at the grocery store and and read the National Enquirer and says, "Oh, Brad Pitt and Angelina are in love." It's all about the divorces and who they're cheating on. It's all the bad news we read about. And unfortunately, we want to hear more about what Sam Bankman-Fried, SBF, did that is so bad.
Yeah. So, you know, it's been a lot has happened since the past time we talked.
Yes.
You know, it's only been a month, but a lot has happened. And basically everything that's happened has been in a span of a week. And it really all started around November 16th, November 17th, plus or minus one day. Sam Bankman-Fried is the founder and CEO of FTX, which is the second biggest crypto exchange in the world. So basically, this is like the Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns moment for crypto.
Right.
And in a matter of 48 hours, the second largest crypto exchange in the world went under. How did that happen? Who's responsible for it? You know, it's really a fascinating story.
I want to ask a question. When you have a crypto exchange, that means I might own, it's like my bank. So if I owned Ethereum or Bitcoin or FTTs, whatever, FFT or FTT, that he had my money, basically. He was the bank.
Yes, this is what we refer to as a centralized exchange,
right,
where it has nothing to do with the blockchain or anything like that. It's not decentralized at all. It has an internal order book. So the exchange has control over your funds. They could at any time freeze your account, do something with your funds. They say they won't, right? But we've seen this time and time again. In an industry that's not regulated enough, these things happen where accounts get frozen, money gets lended out that shouldn't have been lended out. In the case of FTX, what ended up happening was Sam Bankman-Fried, without anyone's knowledge, built a backdoor to lend out user funds without anybody knowing, which is criminal fraud. Right? This is criminal activity. It's been swept under the rug by mainstream media outlets. If you look at any mainstream media outlet like the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, they created very, very like big puff pieces on Sam Bankman-Fried.
Why is that?
Because Sam Bankman-Fried and the U.S. government, and on top of the SEC, and these media outlets have connections. Essentially, Sam Bankman-Fried has been very, very, very strategic when it comes to his donations to certain outlets, certain people. And before this entire collapse happened, right, Sam Bankman-Fried was framed and kind of coined the crown prince of crypto.
Yes.
This charitable guy who just wants to give all his wealth away. He, you know, just drives a Honda Civic. He, you know, he's kind of like the Warren Buffett approach, you know, where Warren Buffett just like eats cheeseburgers and lives in Omaha.
He's living in a multi-million-dollar penthouse in Bahamas.
Yes, precisely, right. So you could see like where the whole issue lies, and essentially, you know, they painted this guy as, oh, you know, he's just, because he's young. He's like 30 years old right now. So when he was, you know, kind of put into this narrative without much control on his own, you know, in all fairness, He was in his mid to late 20s, young guy, right? And he, was painted as this guy even now as someone who wanted to do the right thing, was lighthearted, but took on too much too fast, and an evil attacker, meaning the CEO of Binance, which is the biggest crypto exchange in the world, basically attacked him.
Are you saying evil because he's not evil?
Yeah,
or
he's not evil in this story.
Right.
Not to say that there's no shadiness with Binance. They're not regulated here in the U.S. or anything. They're in Hong Kong, and so that's the whole thing. But
and FTX was regulated where?
So FTX, the thing is, FTX technically had their headquarters in the Bahamas,
right?
But Sam Bankman-Fried would literally go in court and in front of Congress, SEC, everything, and talk about transparency and doing things legally.
Right.
He had a pulse on the regulators here in the U.S., literally lied to their faces while he was performing this criminal activity.
Did he know it's criminal, or he was just ignorant?
He knew it was criminal.
So, continue. I'm so curious about why the news outlets are sweeping this under the rug. I want to get to that point.
I mean, there's the media outlets had a narrative about him, and basically what happened entirely contradicts that narrative. So they want to also cover up themselves. They also, had this.
What is that narrative?
The narrative was that this was this very charitable guy,
okay,
right? Very frugal guy who just wanted to give his money away and was trying to help the future of finance and all of this. And he ended up illegally lending money to people when he shouldn't have.
What about his own Alameda trading firm?
Yeah, so that's the thing. Alameda is basically like FTX didn't want liability or attention on them. So they're like, hey, how about we create this company on the side, this third party, which isn't really a third party because it's literally controlled by them. They're in cahoots essentially. And let Alameda kind of do the whatever trading on the side.
Alameda was like a hedge fund,
It
right?
was a hedge fund, yeah, which they controlled most of FTX's token called FTT.
Now this is what I'm going to get into.
Okay.
Because I understand. Because when I was a coin dealer, there was a dealer who would take something like, I don't know what it was, common quarters that were being printed by the mint, and he'd put in these holders, and he'd put a grade on them, and he'd borrow money against these coins, saying these coins are worth $50 a piece.
Yep.
It cost him a quarter. And he put them in a piece of plastic, so he said they're worth $50, and then he was able to borrow millions and millions and tens of millions of dollars from banks based on this fake currency.
Yep.
Wow.
And I think that's what FTT was.
That's exactly the same.
It was just he just made a crypto FTT. It's mine. I buy whatever I want, and that's my collateral.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm going to try to sum this up as quickly as I can. But essentially, FTX had their own token, right? You can treat it as a stock, but a stock is way more regulated and has way more restrictions and more transparency, all this stuff. This is basically they created a token where they also controlled and manipulated most of their own token. And what they would say is, hey, if there's, let's say, $10 billion worth of user deposits on our exchange, there's going to be actually $10 billion of reserves to match that up, right? So if everybody decides to withdraw money, right, if a bunch of users decide to withdraw a total of $5 billion, those users will actually get $5 billion because FTX has that capital on hand to provide them with $5 million,
right?
$5 billion,
right. Like a bank.
Right? Banks don't actually have that much.
No, they have. I don't know what the number is,
Yeah.
like 10% or something. They have to have a certain amount.
Yes.
The rest of it's loaned out into hopefully good loans.
Yeah, that's a fractional reserve banking, and FTX was actually doing this, but they're not allowed to because they're not a bank. But the point is, a bank run occurred, and while the bank run was occurring, Sam Bankman-Fried literally said, "Hey, all of our assets are backed 1-to-1 with our reserves. The issue is the $10 billion he claimed was backing all the money in users' accounts was made up mostly by their token.
FTT.
So it had no value.
FTT.
So at the time, it was trading at a value that did match that $10 billion.
It was made of value, though.
Okay.
It's not that they just made it up. They manipulated it a lot. Yes, but people were trading it and people invested in it like they would a stock or another token.
Could I have bought FTT a month ago?
Yeah.
And what did it cost me?
About $40
for a coin.
Yeah,
for
a coin. Yeah, and
right.
now it's went all the way basically to zero.
Was it like half
$2?
It was $2 now.
Yeah. But essentially, at $40, they had $10 billion worth of reserves.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, $2,
but
not quite.
What happened was the CEO of Binance essentially, he said that Binance was going to sell off $600 million worth of FTX's token, FTT, because of their shady practices or something. So this caused a bunch of people to start withdrawing from FTX. And this also caused the value of the FTT token to plummet.
Right.
So FTX could not have the reserves on hand anymore because the value of the reserves went down because it's in their own token. They didn't have the capital to be able to match people's withdrawals, so they had to freeze user accounts. And basically, they have an $8 billion hole that they need to fill. And so they have $8 billion they owe to.
Where is that? Is it $40 billion he had? About $40 billion in the accounts? FTX.
FTX, it's hard to say because there's a lot of leverage in the system, but I believe it was somewhere at 20, 30, 40 billion.
Where'd that money go to then?
So the money didn't really exist because it originally was worth that much, but then the value of the collateral kept going down because the FTT token kept going down. So it was really propped up with very, very little substance, essentially.
Is SBF, is he a criminal?
Yes.
Is he going to jail?
He should go to jail.
Is he in Bahamas right now?
I believe he's in the Bahamas right now. Yes.
Do they have a
extradition or something like that? It doesn't seem like it. I mean, he's been talking to regulators during this time as well.
Right.
It's very, very. There's a whole political connection to this. There's a connection with Gary Gensler and SBF, and again, SBF is a donor for a lot of political candidates and stuff like that. So, and a lot of members of Congress.
Isn't FTS like a name on a stadium somewhere? FTX.
Correct. So literally, a good example is FTX. They bought the naming rights to, I believe, the stadium in Tampa Bay.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
And what they could do was they'd be like, all right, we'll buy the naming rights for $10 billion, let's say, but we'll pay it over 10 years. So we only have to pay, $1 billion this year. And they say, we have the money based off of our FTT token being a certain valuation right now. So technically we do have the money in a sense, right? But what they also did was, hey, well, it's $10 billion, but we only have to pay $1 billion right now. So let's just lend out the other $9 billion, right? And do the same thing over and over again, which, again, this is what a bank does, but FTX is not a bank. They're not allowed to do this. It goes against their terms of service, and so they went against their terms of service, which is illegal. And then even worse is Sam Bankman-Fried literally took user deposits and lent it out to Alameda. That's also illegal. That's fraud.
Does Binance or Coinbase, I think they're the two largest exchanges, do they loan money out?
So Coinbase does not.
Right.
Coinbase is not a lender.
Coinbase is public now, right?
Coinbase is public, yeah. So they cannot. There's a lot of things that they can't do, which in the short term might hurt them, but in the long term should be good.
Secure.
It's secure. It's safer. There's not as much risk. They don't do lending. FTX did do lending. They're a private company. Binance does a ton of lending. They're also a private company. Binance now has 60% of all trading volume in all of crypto. So it's a major concern because so much of crypto is now centralized into this one company.
It's based in Hong Kong?
I believe it's based in Hong Kong, yeah. Most of Asia uses it. Most of the world uses it. Coinbase is mostly for U.S. people.
This reminds me, back in, I think in the 1600s, in Holland, they had to hold the tulip. Tulips were huge. People were paying a fortune for tulips.
Right.
It sounds like the same thing. And I understand that we talked about Bitcoin, how it's blockchain and it's secure and it can be used anywhere in the world. But it does seem a little bit like that. Like it's all just fairy dust. I mean, it's fairy dust, isn't it?
A lot of it, 99% of it is fairy dust.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Bitcoin isn't because a little is different.
How come no one else can have a blockchain like Bitcoin? Is it
they-
because of the amount of users? If they have first
First mover advantage.
First mover advantage.
Yeah.
They have everyone doing it, and that's it.
Yeah.
But what happens after Bitcoin runs out? There's no more Bitcoin. There's like a certain amount, 21 million, I think, Bitcoin or 20.
Correct.
What happens when it hits that number? You can't make any more Bitcoin. It's still going to be people still making ledgers and stuff. There'll still be a blockchain.
Yeah. There'll still be a blockchain because a blockchain it's a ledger of all transactions.
Right.
So there will continue to be transactions. People sending Bitcoin from one person to another. People doing something with that Bitcoin. It's mostly just sending to and from wallet addresses. But that's kind of the thing. You know, there's a finite supply. Eventually, that supply will be capped. Now, in reality, all Bitcoin will be minted by like the year 2140 based off of the minting schedule and the halvening schedule. But point is, there's going to be less and less Bitcoin in circulation.
Right.
Now, more and more, but like less minted in circulation.
You know, the Gemara, the arguments in the Gemara, the Jewish knowledge says that like for every good thing that happens in the world, something bad happens out of it, and for every bad thing out of the world, something good happens out of it. And for FTX collapsing and this whole thing being a scandal, which is really bad, you know, doesn't look good for the Jews, but it could be really good for the fact that really it shows what Bitcoin really is, that it's a stable, you know, it's not fake. It's not fairy dust.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's be good for Coinbase, too.
This is good for Coinbase. As long as Coinbase can get through this crypto winter, this should be really good for Coinbase.
What's this winter going to look like?
That's an excellent question. This winter is basically going to look like there's going to be very little liquidity. There's going to be very, very little retail trading because, I mean, people are afraid to use exchanges now. Like, people are even concerned about Coinbase. So it's just, no one new is going to come in.
Do you have to have an exchange?
You do.
What is Square? Square is not PayPal, but Square. Doesn't Square do Bitcoin also?
They do. But they're a company that it's called a fiat on ramp off ramp.
Right.
So essentially, like the whole point of FTX and Coinbase and Binance is that it's a way for you. It's an easy way for you to exchange your fiat currency, your local currency, U.S. dollars, the shekel here after you buy your falafel, all of that, right? It's an easy way to exchange your fiat currency for crypto, Bitcoin, ETH, whatever, and then from there you can send it to your digital wallet, which only you control, not the exchange. You can send it to your wallet and then buy NFTs or whatever. But you do need that on-ramp, off-ramp. There's ways to kind of circumvent it, but it's virtually impossible. And it's essential to have these easy on-ramps to literally on-ramp new users.
So what does Square do then?
Square does the same thing. They basically buy up a bunch of Bitcoin or whatever asset, and they allow you to exchange your fiat currency for Bitcoin.
So is that like an exchange, like Coinbase?
It's like an exchange, yeah. It's like an exchange. Yeah, it's a little bit different because this is focused on payments and stuff like that. Coinbase is more focused on just literally trading.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm curious if this can happen again, if people are going to see the way that the news has been reacting and a lot of regulation has not even been in discussion. Or has it? Has there been a lot of regulation and discussion?
Yes. I mean, regulation is going to be on the forefront for crypto after this.
Okay. Because
you literally had the biggest player in crypto talking to the SEC, lying to their face, and yeah. Like, if that's not
they're not going to like that.
They're not going to like that. In fact, it just recently came out, I believe yesterday or 2 days ago, that the SEC actually wanted to probe FTX, but it was basically shot down from a group of like 8 people, 5 of which got donations from Sam Bankman-Fried.
Oh, wow.
So,
Congressman, you're saying?
Yes.
Wow.
This is a huge.
So that needs to be investigated also.
Everything needs to be investigated. It's all a very, very intertwined, corrupted system.
It's an industry that seems to already lack trust on a general populace level, and this doesn't do anything to help it.
No.
What do you have to say about that, and how do we rebuild from there?
So the thing is that this doesn't really have to do that much with, like, the ethos of crypto and blockchain technology. Like, this was just a centralized exchange.
Yeah.
Like, in reality, this, if anything, the blockchain, because it's a transparent ledger, right? So people who can actually read the public blockchain have been able to kind of see the audit trail and gain more evidence on what actually happened between FTX, Alameda, all this stuff. So it actually shows the strength of decentralized finance and the decentralized finance products in a way, and the transparency of blockchain, and just further diminishes the value, or I guess the perception of transparency with these centralized entities like FTX and Celsius back in the day, right? Like, but at the same time, you need these centralized entities to help bring in new players. So it's good and bad. It shows that the true projects working on decentralization, transparency using blockchain technology, they still have tremendous value, and in fact help in these scenarios to bring down bad actors. But it's going to be a very difficult transition. And this will certainly hurt mainstream adoption and put crypto back a couple years at the very least.
For everything good, something bad has to happen. You know, by the way, this bad happening can be good for crypto because now it's going to be regulated and people trust it more.
Exactly.
But what's it going to look like for, you know, as you know, being Jews?
Yeah.
How does this look to us? How does this look to the people that are looking for excuse to bash the Jews? Which, by the way, I've been reading tons of. If you watch Olivia and Clarity podcast on TikTok, there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of anti-Semitic remarks.
Yeah, I think, you know, the purpose of Judaism, of being a Jew, is to become the best version of yourself and to positively impact the world.
Yes.
Right? It's to give, it's to be a light, and it's very, very difficult to be a light in industries that are typically very dark, and those industries typically involve money. The stakes are really high, right? The business world, it's so difficult to be ethical in the business world without the right people around you, without the education and importance and emphasis on ethics, on morality, right? On wisdom, because really, like in universities, right? You typically take one business ethics course, or I studied computer science, and so we had one ethics course on technology, right? In the tech space, it's just one course, and people kind of write it off.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the same thing in the workforce, where HR has you do your yearly training on what's ethical and all this stuff, and people just brush it off when it's literally the most important thing. Because imagine this is a 26, 27-year-old kid, right, who is living in this bubble where people are saying they can do anything. And this is another thing. People think that, just because you went to a good college and you had a good job on Wall Street, you're a genius.
Yeah.
The furthest thing from the truth. It could mean you're a genius.
It's probably very smart. No one's saying it. Very smart.
Very smart guy in specific domains, right? And his personality fits with that and everything, right? It all comes together. But that doesn't mean, you all of a sudden you throw him in the situation with a ton of responsibility, a ton of money, a ton of power. How is he supposed to respond?
Are you saying that SBF didn't have a rabbi?
I don't believe he did.
Because if he did, he probably have his morals straight.
Absolutely.
Right.
He had people around him who he just didn't have the right people around him.
Right.
You really are a result of who you surround yourself by.
For
The
sure.
closest people you're surrounded by, it's who you are.
I tell my students all the time, you got to have a coach, a rabbi, someone to guide you, someone to mentor, not a yes man.
Yes.
Someone who's willing to tell you the truth.
One of the things they tell us all the time here is, somebody who becomes more observant in practice, but becomes a worse person, isn't representing Judaism. They're not representing a religious person. They're representing a self-righteous person. And unfortunately, we get grouped with those people who are not behaving. We're 0.2% of the population, and we're completely irrationally represented in the news. And then we are labeled according to those people who make the news and those headlines. And there's a whole world of people looking for those people.
Yeah.
It makes it really hard for all Jews, no matter where we are, especially on college campuses, to be proud of who we are.
It's difficult because oftentimes, doing the right thing in the short term gives you a disadvantage, right? It very well looks like a disadvantage, especially in the short term. And a lot of people, it's difficult to have the patience to see the effects of your actions in the long term, right? Which often is the case, right? Like the things at the end of the day, the greatest things in life, the greatest impact you have on people, it's over the long haul. It's hard. The best things in life, it's really hard to get. You have to put in the work and you have to be patient. And so especially in the business world, right? It's like in the short term, you're at a disadvantage. It feels like you're at a disadvantage. And on top of that, typically making the right decisions helps you avoid big mistakes. But you don't realize you avoid them because the mistakes don't happen, right? So like
Right.
I, for example, spent months figuring out if I want to onboard users to FTX or Coinbase, right? Months, like literally maybe for over a year. And I, kept sticking with Coinbase, because I just didn't think the risk was worth it on FTX and all this stuff, right? I did all the due diligence, but it wasn't an easy decision per se. And this entire time, people were complaining like, oh, but FTX is better. There's lending. Why didn't you have me go on FTX? And it was tough because people were like, David, what's going on? You didn't give us the right advice, blah, blah, blah. And it took, unfortunately, this had to happen. But
now you look like a genius.
And now it's
It's
like,
not you're a
thank
genius.
God.
It was a decision you had to make. What's going to be safer for my clients?
Right, exactly.
Which is not always sexiest.
It's not sexy
No.
at all,
No.
right? And now I do have a certain satisfaction where it's like, okay, I avoided a lot of pain for the people that I was working with
Right.
and that I helped. But again, it took a whole year, and I was getting some backlash for it. It didn't feel good, right?
Right.
But I know I did the right thing. So
Right.
it's difficult, and it's subtle too.
It doesn't always reveal itself like
it
this.
doesn't
either.
always reveal itself. Yeah, exactly.
This is definitely a pat on the back for your intuition.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. But it takes a lot of due diligence. One of the other big things is, especially nowadays, people don't care about the truth. People don't want to give you the truth, right? Why do these media outlets say this stuff? They don't care about the truth. They just care about feeding you into a narrative. And especially if they started the narrative, they need to continue and double down on that narrative, right?
I think it's called fake news.
Fake news, like whatever. It's everything has an agenda. Everything, you have to question everything, right? Especially nowadays. And if you don't pursue the truth, right? Like most people probably think that Sam Bankman-Fried was like, it's not his fault.
Yeah.
That's what most people probably think, right? Because it's New York Times, it's Wall Street Journal, it's Forbes.
Is that what they're saying? Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, it's this guy who basically just, he wanted to help the world, and he took on too much all at once. And the CEO of Binance basically, caused the entire empire.
So they're blaming him.
They're blaming him. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
This is a threefold trigger. You could read this as, oh, he wasn't that bad, he's a victim of circumstance. So there's going to be a big group of people who read it that way. There's going to be a group of anti-Semites who read this as it's the Jews' fault. Look, it's another Jew. And then there's going to be a bunch of Jews who now are going to walk around with their head in between their arms, with their head down, embarrassed to be Jewish. Meaning that the story and the narrative writes itself, and we can be victims of just believing those narratives instead of finding out what is the truth.
Yes.
What's it really about?
Yes. The pursuit of truth is the most important thing in today's day and age, and the truth is also dangerous. Like saying the truth is dangerous now.
Well, it can be. That's what we call our podcast "Living in Clarity."
Right.
Yeah.
We want to live in clarity, which is the truth.
Which is the truth.
And sometimes it hurts.
It does.
I just want to address straight to the viewers of this episode how important I think this episode is. Anti-Semitism is incredibly prevalent beyond proportion what we would have expected. We've seen it on our own podcast comments, and we appreciate all the comments and all the views. But it's something that's very important. I want to make a plea that you find out the truth and you write your own narrative and you ask, why is that the case and what is it really like? It's the most important thing you could ever do for yourself is to look and find the real clarity.
Yeah, don't judge the Jews by the Jews. Just because you hear about it doesn't mean that's what everyone does.
Especially the ones in the news.
Yeah, now you're in your yeshiva and like you're living the life, aren't you?
Yeah. Everybody here is wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like true goodness, and it's not like what you see on the news. And it was tough for me. Like I remember when I came here, I was like, at first I was like, are people really like that good? Are people really? Because everybody here is essentially, they're leaving. They're everything they do, is to help impact the world, to better themselves. It's genuine goodness all around, and it's very rare in this world.
It is. It's because it's our job to change the world, not let the world change us.
Yeah.
And finding that takes a search.
Yeah.
Yeah. 23.
And be
years.
open. And to be open.
And to be open to it.
Yes. Yeah.
You're wise beyond beyond your years, just so you know. You're not like a typical 23-year-old young man.
I am old. I do feel old. I had my midlife crisis already. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad you're past that hump.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm past it.
And now you're in yeshiva.
I'm in yeshiva. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What a privilege. It's so nice to have this conversation with
Yep.
you. Thank you for joining us and shedding some light on the current situation. Really, it's eye-opening.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening.
Yeah, see you next time. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Living in Clarity podcast.
If you enjoy what you just heard, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment with any suggestions for future episodes.
We'll see you next time.